Welcome everyone, good afternoon to all and welcome to today's public flagship lecture as part of the Enlight European University Week. So delighted to be here, delighted to be hosting this. My name is Jamie Goggins. I'm the Director of Research and Innovation in the School of Engineering at the National University of Ireland, Galway. So we're a member of the Enlight partnership in there. And today's public flagship lecture series is about climate change and the circular economy. So three of the massive global challenges that we face today are obviously climate change, biodiversity loss, and the circular economy. So that's the topic of our flagship public lecture this afternoon. Just a little bit about Enlight. So we're hosting this event. Enlight bring together 9 comprehensive research-intensive universities from 9 European countries. So we have Belgium, Estonia, France, Germany, Ireland, Netherlands, Slovakia, Spain, and Sweden all included in this partnership. Between those 9 universities, they train over 300,000 learners every year and share a deep commitment to their social responsibility. So the mission of Enlight Partners is to contribute to the fundamental transformation of European higher education that empowers learners as global, engaged citizens with state-of-the-art knowledge, skills, and innovation potential to tackle major societal transitions and to promote equitable quality of life and sustainability. So no bigger challenges than those of the climate change and circular economy. That is what today is, or this afternoon session is about. So we're honored to have 3 fantastic speakers today, who I'll introduce briefly now and give a more detailed introduction just before their keynote. So our first speaker is Veronica Manfredi, who's the Director of Quality of Life, Director General Environment in the European Commission. And she's going to, her keynote is on the bigger picture challenges, which obviously the 4 planetary challenges that she's going to discuss: climate change, resource use, biodiversity loss, and pollution. So they're global challenges, but there's also local solutions to these global challenges. So Ms. Manfredi will discuss the European Green Deal, which provides an action plan to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy, restore biodiversity, and cut pollution. She'll also discuss other environmental policy priorities and funding and opportunities in there. We'll then have Professor Guido Sonnemann, who's a full professor in sustainable chemistry. He's head of the Life Cycle Group in the Institute of Molecular Sciences at the University of Bordeaux. And the title of his keynote is Circular Economy as a Key Concept within the Transition to a Low Carbon and Resource Efficient Economy. So the presentation will explain what is a circular economy, why it's essential by sharing experiences and examples of good practice. Our third speaker is Professor Estibaliz Saez de Cámara, who is a professor of environmental technology at the University of the Basque Country. And her keynote will be on climate feedback, looking there to see if there's any connection between tourism-led land use changes in the Mediterranean and extreme rainfall events in Central Europe. As I said at the outset, my name is Jamie Goggins, and I'm Director of Research and Innovation in the School of Engineering at the National University of Ireland in Galway. And I might just take this opportunity just to say a little bit about what we're doing this topic in the National University of Ireland, Galway. So sustainability is one of the 4 core values of our university, alongside respect, excellence, and openness. So we're going to launch this the NUI Galway Sustainability Strategy next week, and we're very, very honoured and proud that Dr. Mary Robinson, who's the former President of Ireland, former UN Commissioner for Human Rights and the Chair of the Elders, is going to launch this strategy alongside our Student Union President and the President of our university, and a guest from Penn State University, Michelle Hassel. So our strategy sets out an ambitious vision to lead the transition to a sustainable future by embedding sustainability in its culture, operational policies, and governance structures, and empowering its communities to be champions of sustainabilities. So, linked to the topic today of climate change and circular economy, our university in Galway is a living laboratory for carbon neutral and sustainable and smart cities. So in our strategic plan, we've committed to developing a roadmap to move towards carbon neutrality by 2030. So of course, across Europe, the aim is 2050. We're trying to accelerate that, which is a huge challenge. So it's supported by our model to learn, live, and lead sustainability across the university mission as set out in the strategy. So we will continue to embed sustainability literacy into all aspects of the university learning and research. So that's the learn part. We'll implement the principles of sustainability throughout campus operations and engagement activities. So that's the live aspect. And we aim to play a central and transformational role in attaining the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030. So that's the lead aspect. So that's our learn, live, lead model. So moving towards carbon neutrality is just one flagship action in our university strategy. Our mission is surrounded about 3 themes, which is research and learning, energy and greenhouse gas emissions, nature and ecosystems, health and well-being, built environment, and leadership and governance. So we have a key commitment as the university to align all our major efforts with Sustainable Development Goals, targets and indicators, including education, research, leadership, operation and engagement activities. So basically every major decision that's made in the university has to be aligned to the SDGs. Of course, our strategy is not just an inward-looking strategy. We have commitment to scaling sustainability success beyond the campus by building sustainable partnerships with neighbouring communities, national bodies and partnerships across Europe and the globe. So the Inlight partnership is, is a core partnership as part of this superb network of universities sharing a deep commitment to their social responsibilities. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker, Veronica Manfredi, who, as I mentioned, she's the Director of Quality of Life at the DG Environment at the European Commission, there since February 2018 in that role. Our directorate plays a pivotal role in leading Europe towards a zero pollution ambition and contributes to tackle the climate and biodiversity crisis. It is indeed responsible, for key European EU policies for clean and well-managed water, compliance with high health standards for drinking water, clean air, control on industrial emissions, and prevention of industrial accidents. Internally, her team leads the EU negotiations within the UN Convention on Mercury and the UN Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution. It also provides steady support in the work of the 4 regional sea conventions and the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine and the Danube rivers. So she's a lawyer by background. Veronica has deepened her knowledge of the international EU law in Rome, Turin, Kiel, Bruges, and Brussels. With that, I'd like to hand over to Veronica for her keynote on the bigger picture challenges. Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you very much, Professor Goggins. I'm really delighted to be with you this afternoon, and I would like to especially congratulate the organizers of this event, and more importantly, of the entire Enlight Consortium. I think it's fair to say that seeing this alliance coming up between 9 first-range European universities and building such a permanent structure of cooperation is really fantastic, to pool resources, multiply the opportunities, and enable the younger generations to face the challenges of tomorrow. In your introductory remark, Professor Goggins, we have already been highlighting all the flagships area of cooperation. Allow me to stress just a few of them. Health and well-being in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, green and digital transition more horizontally, the notion of leaving no one behind, the compliance with our very ambitious Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Well, they also summarize the European agenda of today. Business as usual is no longer an option. This is clear. And this is also why we are all here today. Our planet, indeed, as you said yourself in your introductory remarks, Professor, is de facto facing 4 completely intertwined crises: climate change, biodiversity loss, unsustainable use of resources, and pollution, which is our closest link, although not the only one, to the human health agenda as well. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned, and very repeatedly so, about the effects of a sustained global warming, and extreme events are becoming more and more frequent all over the world, as too often, actuality shows to all of us. The pandemic that we suffer now will have far less impact than the climate crisis as such. The IPBES report, so the report of the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity, has warned that ecosystems are in decline And today, 25% of the world species are threatened. 1 million species face extinction. The invasion of natural habitats is a driver for the introduction of pandemics. And this has been the case for COVID-19. We overexploit our resources. The European industry only uses 12% of recycled materials. 12% of the entire materials used get recycled today. On the 22nd of August, 2020, we have marked the day where the human ecological footprint overshot the capacities of the planet. There is just a little problem. We don't have a planet B. Not yet, at least. We are going to Mars, you never know. But I don't think we are still ready to have a substitution of our beautiful Mother Earth. Linear economy has a direct impact on the atmosphere, on soils, on waters. Apart from the damage to ecosystems, each year in the world, 9 million people die prematurely because of pollution. Think that in Europe, where we are much more advanced than other parts of the world, we are paying every year, not just in COVID-19 times, but every year, a toll of 1/8 premature death attributable to pollution. I said it already, business as usual is not an option. The European Environment Agency has warned that virtually all the environmental indicators will worsen by 2025 unless, and this is where the beauty comes, unless we take action and change course of action. The Sustainable Development Goals, as you know, give priority to the planet, and this priority has been indeed fully taken on board by the European Commission since the arrival of our new president, Dr. Ursula von der Leyen. You know that she has put the European Green Deal as the top out of the 6 political priorities on which the College of Commissioners is working right now. And this European Green Deal is really the framework for a green transition, climate neutrality, sustainable growth, and job creation. It foresees the need to transform the EU into a fairer and prosperous society with a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy, making our European companies leaders in the green market. Climate neutrality of the continent to be reached by 2050 is at the heart of the message enshrined by the European Green Deal. Economic growth decoupled from resource use, a refocused attention on protecting, conserving, and enhancing the natural capital, the basis on which our entire economy and societies must be able to be sustained. Protection, enhanced protection of human life, health, and well-being. A just and inclusive transition. And in a way, least, becoming a global leader by example. In addition to this very ambitious EU agenda, the Green Deal, of course, now comes as an urgent opportunity in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. It provides indeed for an integrated approach which tackles every single European policy area. It has as a main driver this notion of breaking through across silos, developing a mentality that interlinks the factors and ensures much enhanced policy coherence, ranging from topics which are more typical of agriculture to those dealt with in transport, offshore clean energies, consumer policy, all brought intelligently together. From the street environmental point of view, the 8th environmental action program, which is currently being discussed by the co-legislators, European Parliament and Council, is really the backbone of environmental policy, and of course a super important pillar in implementing the Green Deal vision. It establishes 6 priorities, for example, on pollution, zero pollution, restoration of biodiversity and of natural capital as such, and 11 horizontal enabling conditions that entail, of course, effective implementation. They link the environmental challenges to the European semester, the regular macroeconomic assessment carried out by the member states and European Commission in order to constantly improve the economic and hence social and environmental performance of our member states, revamped priority to nature-based solution, revamped attention to sustainable investment, and a level of taxation that gives the right price signal, the digital transition, the better empowerment of citizens in all their roles in society, and of course, an attention to secure that this vision is better brought forward and mainstreamed in the European Commission's global action. The Green Deal, as you know, saw the light, so the public light, on the 11th of December 2019. Since then, the European Commission has proposed the biggest set of policy and legislation since the 90s. The COVID crisis has pushed even further for European solutions. Given the amount of new materials which has come out from our services in the course of the last months, I understand that the audience may need a little bit of an overview to know in which direction we are going. So let me try to provide you a quick overview. To begin with, as you know, and as we have already said, we are aiming towards climate neutrality by 2015 and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030, as opposed to the previous target, which was 40%. A proposal for a climate law has been tabled by the European Commission already a number of months ago, and it is now in rather crucial stages of negotiation with Council and Parliament. And it proposes binding targets with the aim also to bring legal security and create a predictable business environment. The targets imply decisions to be taken by business operators, by policymakers, and there must be clarity about what needs to be done by when to meet which kind of level of targets. The European Climate Pact was launched last December the 16th, and it aims to bring together all the governance level and different civil society forces, including, of course, research and academia, to create a space for participation and collective thinking, innovative thinking. The second Circular Economy Action Plan for a cleaner and more competitive Europe was adopted by the College in March 2020, just 3 working days before the entire Brussels staff was put in lockdown. It foresees a series of legislative and non-legislative actions to push for resource efficiency and sustainability of the products by design. So at the moment they get conceived and throughout their life cycle, with a view to foster also more sustainable consumption, next to more sustainable production, of course, and ensure that the resources are kept in our economy for as long as possible. Examples out of the strategy, well, a lot of focus on fighting single use. Exemplary and iconic, I would say, is our legislative proposal, by now already a directive on single-use plastic. Focus on microplastics to be eliminated progressively from, for example, textile production. Strengthening the market of byproducts and secondary resources. Empower the consumer with better information so that they can choose, really understanding also the environmental footprint of its own choices, less premature obsolescence, and a truly more effective right to repair. In particular, the textile value chain and the construction sectors deserve a special attention in that action plan. Following these, the Renovation Way for Europe was adopted in October 2020. Also, departing from the assumption that, as we know, if we look at our built environment, 80% of our buildings across Europe are supposed to be still in use in 2050, and they currently consume 40% of our overall energy consumption. This renovation wave was complemented by the launch by President von der Leyen of a European Bauhaus initiative, which intends to be an interdisciplinary space of co-creation, a truly cultural movement to shape the sustainable built environment of the future. The Farm to Fork strategy for a fair, healthy, and environmentally friendly food system was adopted in May 2020. It provides an integrated framework for the entire food cycle and comes together with the new common agricultural policy, also in crucial miles towards its final adoption, with stronger conditionality and actions on nutrients, pesticides, and antimicrobials. The EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 got adopted also in the same day as Farm to Fork in May 2020. And it is really our boldest action to bring the ecosystems back to a more normal path. It foresees that at least 30% of our land and seas must be protected by 2030. Other key elements of which I would invite you to take note, stemming from the strategy, is that there are targets to restore, for example, 25,000 kilometers of free-flowing and renaturalized rivers, planting 3 billion trees, urban biodiversity plans for every city above 20,000 inhabitants, and a generalized priority for nature-based solution. 3 other strategies I would like to mention together: the industrial strategy, adopted also in March 2020, the chemical strategy in October 2020, and the pharmaceutical strategy. They intend to create altogether an environment where industries can thrive, ensure the resilience of these sectors, and the security of supply for Europeans. These 3 strategies are part of our encompassing move towards, at the same time, push for environmental, economic, and revamped societal sustainability, pushing for innovation, pushing for leadership, pushing for, at the same time, cutting wherever technically feasible greenhouse gases and pollutants, showing that growth is possible when decoupling emissions at the same time. There are more initiatives, and it's impossible to detail everything to you in such a short time frame, but some that I would like still to stress is the EU strategy for energy system integration, the hydrogen strategy for a climate neutral Europe, the initiative to reduce methane emissions, the new consumer agenda, the offshore strategy, and our initiative to improve access to justice in environmental matters in order to secure that what we have agreed gets really implemented also at local level with better empowerment also of civil society. Last December, we had the European mobility strategy adopted as well. This is a strategy that designs a vision for a sustainable, smart, and resilient mobility system for the future generation. The greenhouse gas emissions will have to be reduced by 90% by 2050 from the overall transport sector, in line with the vision emitted by the strategy. And we are also foreseeing a 75% cut to road freight, which has to leave the road. So reducing road transport to the benefit of other modes of transport as such. The strategy also announces plans, including from a research angle, to stimulate a renovation also of our fleets, in order to go towards those zero emission vehicles, which are needed for our maritime and inland navigations as well. Last week, precisely last week, 24th of February, the Commission has adopted the Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, which proposes also a holistic and integrated approach to climate adaptation and includes a large number of concrete actions. Among those, let me highlight those that touch on water management, which is particularly dear to my heart, and which looks, of course, at how to better prevent, first of all, forecast, minimize the impact of floods, droughts, and in general deal with water scarcity, extreme weather events. The focus on nature-based solution is guaranteed in the strategy as well. The last piece to come will be precisely the Zero Pollution Action Plan, on which the department that I lead will be in the lead indeed. This is the first integrated EU framework to tackle the pollution of air, water, and soil. It will focus on pollutants of emerging concerns, such as microplastics and pharmaceutical, and will define the way to update also existing legislation on water and air, including new actions to better protect our soils. A forest strategy is expected for 2021 as well. This one and all the other Green Deal proposals in the pipeline are open to your public participation on our website. Europe, you have your say. Please engage, please participate. Contribution from our citizens are always extremely precious and welcome. As you well understand, all these challenges not only are intertwined, but they are truly transboundary. And this is why we intend to go for an open multilateral approach, cooperate with our neighbors and our partners, and use our regulatory power, because our companies need to upgrade their sustainability to have access to an increasingly open, fairer market in Europe and beyond. So a policy of enhancing standards in Europe, which goes hand in hand with securing that other global partners follow suit or even anticipate in some case. The recent communication on multilateralism that we adopted in February confirms that the Green Deal is and will stay at the core also of European foreign policy. President von der Leyen mentioned in Davos that this is really the plan. And now in 2021, we will have a number of milestone international events that will mark the ground. I think of the United Nations COP15 meeting, which was scheduled to take place in Kunming. Let's see how this will be done. I think we are heading now towards a virtual meeting, but this COP15 will be crucial to ascertain the will of the world to engage on fighting biodiversity loss. We will have the COP26 on climate change, Glasgow, and then also the United Nations Food System Summit, which will be all really crucial moments. And we will also have other key global fora coming up, notably at the level of the WTO, G20, and at OECD level. The recent communication of the European Commission on the trade policy review also aims to improve the sustainability and the resilience of value chains at global level, and to make it clear that our future trade agreement will all have to contain enforceable sustainability chapters as well. When I look at the budget that we give to ourselves to get there where we want to go, I see that the EU budget 2021-2027 is now complemented by this really unprecedented recovery package, which is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver a truly greener and more digital recovery. Indeed, the 672 billion euro of the recovery and resilience facility have to be seen in conjunction with the overall EU budget 2021-2027, which means that all in all, we have a firepower of 1.85 trillion euro to boost and sustain the efforts of our member states to build back greener, digital, fairer. You know that all the member states now are working hard on their recovery and resilience plans, which have to be submitted to the Commission by April 2021. They will have to secure that 37% of the planned budget is related to climate and environmental objectives and needs to be implemented by 2026 at the latest. These plans will be integrated in our European semester this year. So what is the place for knowledge in such a context? Well, dear friends, research and innovation are at the core. The last call of Horizon 2020 included 1 billion euros to support the Green Deal. The next, Horizon Europe, will be one of the pillars to provide solutions that today don't exist, such as the non-polluting ships of the future for our waterways. The European Skills Agenda for Sustainable Competitiveness, Social Fairness and Resilience has paved the way for this skills revolution, as we have called it, which is needed in this recovery after COVID-19. Inside our European Skills Agenda, you see an Action 6 on skills to support the green and digital transition, including a taxonomy of skills, indicators, the creation of a European competence framework, engaging all educational levels. The European Skills Agenda is empowered with 65 billion euros, including those stemming, of course, from the European Social Fund. To conclude, I think we are really paving the way for the next generation. My own generation and the generation that is now in the campuses have radically different life experience. I am not a boomer. I belong to the generation X. And in any case, I'm one of those who can use the webcam more or less, as you see, but I'm not yet a YouTuber. The generation born in the late 90s and now in university is the generation Z. This generation has not known a world without crisis. You have known the financial crisis and now COVID-19 stealing a precious year of your youth, if not more. I'm sorry to say that we cannot promise to you and to even younger generation a stable future. President Joe Biden during his inauguration speech, coined the expression Cascade of Crisis. I think that societal change will be the rule and not the exception in the years to come. This is why we must have education, an education which gives the tools, the power to be able to thrive in a world that today no one really knows, but which will have to be greener, more digital, but above all, fairer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Veronica. That's a fantastic talk. So without further ado, just to so we don't lose time, I'm going to introduce our next keynote. So our next keynote speaker. Sorry. Our next keynote speaker is now just getting my system set up here. Yep. Next keynote speaker is Professor Guido Sonnemann, who's a full professor at the University of Bordeaux, where he heads up the Life Cycle Group at the Institute of Molecular Science. The focus is the research on life cycle assessment for sustainable chemistry and materials. He's a holder of the Regional Chair of Excellence on Life Cycle Assessment that supports the priority clusters of the new Aquine in their research, and has been appointed as member of the Regional Advisory Committee on Circular Economy. He's also co-founder and executive committee chair of the Forum of Sustainability through Life Cycle Innovation. Until 2012, Guido was science focal point for the UNEP's resource efficiency sub-program. Oh, sorry, switch over. So with that, I'll hand over to Guido for his presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much. for this introduction. So, and also thanks so much for the previous talk that already set well the scene for my now more academic talk about the circular economy as a key concept within the transition to a low carbon and resource efficient economy, where I will come back to this concept that, as you have seen, is part now of European policy making with this very holistic approach that you understood, and also coming to the interfering in the design of products, what I will also, talk about. And actually I had chosen examples from the mobility and food was also mentioned. So I think we are here sort of coming together. Also, there might be some overlaps, but I'm trying to have here a more, didactic approach as a university professor, and not announcing the new policies. So with this, what I will introduce to you is first the circular economy, and then the basic idea of what it means to have a more resource efficient and low carbon economy, and the key word that was also mentioned before about decoupling environmental impacts and resource use from economic growth and human well-being. And then showing the value of taking a life cycle approach for the design of new products. And then following up, I have been involved in the expert group here in the local region of New Aquitaine to implement the circular economy. So I will take this as a local, regional approach in comparison to what you heard about the European agenda. And then I will, at the end, as a university professor, also provide some insights on research. 2 points I have selected. I also saw that the word nature-based solutions were mentioned before, but I had a PhD on this, but I had not chosen that as a topic here to present. And then I come up with some overall conclusions, and I will try to do all this in a bit less than 20 minutes. So the first part is why we are here in a sphere where you are hearing it might be a cascade of crisis and not just a smooth evolution as we had perhaps from Second World War until the financial crisis 2008. Well, at least from the environment sides, we have trends that show that we have entered now the Anthropocene, as other colleagues, scientific colleagues, have called this current epoch. And this means we are part of the big acceleration. You see here the increase of carbon dioxide emissions since the industrial revolution. You see at the same time the loss of tropical forest. You see the loss of biosphere degradation in the same time period. And also you see the generation or the loss of stratospheric ozone, so the ozone layer. But the good news on the last part, on the strategic ozone layer, is you see that humans have been able to stop this due to the Montreal Protocol. So, and we all hope that with the efforts that were described at European, but moreover at UN level, we will be able to stop also here these other trends. But this might mean that we have to change our consumption and production patterns in a way that we have not done, at least since this big acceleration started. In particular, it became steeper and steeper since the Second World War. So what is now one of these solutions is the circular economy, that in principle is inspired by the idea of natural ecosystems, where the waste of one becomes, the source for another system to live, and providing in this way, environmental and social and economic value. And it is to support the decoupling of economic growth from this depletion of natural resources and environmental impacts through the so-called multiple 3R, that at the end aims to have a material as long as possible in our environment and avoiding as much as possible any dissipation, because in this way we are mining not to consume, but to use as long as possible And for this, we need the eco-design and the overcome the planned obsolescence of any products. And so we are creating in this way positive values for each time we use and reuse a material. Positive value means that we are also reduce environmental impacts, but create economic benefits, in particular also social ones with new jobs related to this growing sector. So why we are moving to an circular economy is about leaving behind the old model of the linear economy, because the linear economy is we extract raw materials, we produce, consume them, and we generate waste. And this leads to the environmental challenges that we are facing with, and the greenhouse gases mentioned are the most important example, because fossil fuels is we extract the raw material, produce, we consume, and we generate waste. And this waste is just we use our atmosphere as the sink for this waste. And we are now seeing what after 200 years of doing so, what has we have got that is the first signs of really climate change happening. So, and this is only one example for one resource, and you have multiple resources, and it's about moving into this circularity. And this means we have to take a holistic approach, a life cycle approach, what I will explain you later. So it's about moving from an impact reduction now to a value creation model, so a real shift in the mind of how we run the economy. And a leader in promoting this circular economy concept has been the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that also has worked together on these topics with the European Commission, with the UN, and also here with, for example, the region in Aquitaine through the French Institute of Circular Economy. And their key parts is, and I'm focusing here now on the topic of raw materials or materials, what's more in my area of research. It's you have on one side the abiotic resources where you apply multiple R's, so you are reducing, then you are utilizing, recycling, but also you are reconditioning and repairing to extend the lifetime, and you increase the intensity of the use. That's the abiotic resources. On the other side, you have the biotic resources, where it's more about a cascade use, and also energy use, like biogas is important. And overall, to also see how we can move this from a chemical point of view, how to have a bio-sourced chemistry. And overall, we need to recover the nutrients so that the soils are not getting less and less quality, so that therefore it's not only a cycle with regard to the carbon and the overall biomass, but particularly also the nutrients related to it. But this is only the cycles here of the raw materials, but we have at the same time other cycles. And from what we observe in the world is that we are currently not a recycled circular economy with regard to the raw materials. We have only 6.5% according to those data here, because you see that a lot of one is used for energy that is purely linear, and you have at the same time here a lot part that go into stocks from the construction. Only a small part is really recycled. Europe does a bit better with 13% of circularity, but Europe is only 12% of the total, and also 13% it would be, so the policymakers in Brussels would agree that's far from their current ambitions with these new programs put apart. You see that here we have not only construction materials, but also biomass and metals that are being recycled. So then, as I said, we don't only have the recycling or the circular of raw materials, but we have a natural cycle that is the water. So this is, we can use water for as a renewable source, and this is cycled. And we are, of course, have to be very careful how now the water cycle functions, because with climate change, there are changes that are anticipated. And this leads me then to the carbon cycle. And this is a currently no cycle because, as I said, as humans, we are adding fossil fuels, and this way we increase the parts per million concentration of CO2 and also of methane in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and also in the ocean with the acidification that it implies. So that's the real part of what it means to move from a linear to a circular economy that is part of the agenda. Therefore, the circular economy is on both sides. It's on the changes of the raw materials and the energy agenda, and it's asking, for quick changes to, avoid this big acceleration or stop this that we had seen at the beginning. So one way of going out is then a resource efficiency, and it is about changing from the fossil fuels, and then we need to produce our energy and the products and services with other resources. We cannot burn just fossil fuels. So we have started to look into biofuels as an option, and we had competition with food that was not a solution. And also the others, we see that we need actually too much land, so that now the solutions in mobility, for example, are to use, electricity produced by renewable energy, and then we need a lot of minerals and metals. So we need resilient supply chain for these newer relevant, new fuels of the low carbon economy. And this is work we developed when I was in the UN with the Secretary of International Resource Panel. So, and that means overall, we are bringing together the efficiency of the economic level with the environmental dimension, because it's win-win solution for both. We are just reducing the losses and maximize the yields for all resources, materials, biomass, water, carbon, energy, land, to do more with less resources and with less environmental impacts. And this leads us then to the decoupling agenda. That means we are aiming at having an absolute decoupling with regard to at least some environmental impacts. The ones that we have seen are accelerating so strongly. And we have these two main issues of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and biodiversity loss. These changes probably will still need more resources, as I explained, because we will have to build a society based on renewable resources, but then these resources need to be used in a circular way to minimize also the amount needed. So the overall dimension, if we want to assess from a holistic point of view, the environmental impact is done through the IPAT equation that shows us what are the main factors of influence of this environmental impact. And this is the population, where the UN estimations consider that this century we will arrive at a peak. And then it is affluence. That's what we all aim at. It's not only goods and services, but it's really the quality of life. And what we are using for this is technology. And this is where we as researchers work on, trying to develop technologies that are having less environmental impact, less carbon footprint, and this change in the technologies to allow, to maintain an affluence for the population available. And in my research, we are providing the metrics to measure these impacts of those technologies. So, and now I come to the point of how the advantage of taking a life cycle approach. A life cycle approach means, taking the whole life cycle into account from its resource extraction over its production, use or consumption to the end of life. If it is consumption and return to the environment, it's a linear economy. If it is reused or recycled, it is a circular one. And it's not only the flows that we are looking at, it's also to work with the actors to make a change. And for packaging, for example, you have the extended producer responsibility as a way to ensure that while you are designing products, you are looking already at the end of life. So I have chosen, as I said, two examples here. One, the car, the vehicle, and where I already said that there was an understanding that the use phase, evidently with the carbon emissions, are the most impacting life cycle step. And the question is how to reduce this impacts. There is the idea of biofuels that we have seen there is a limit of land. So therefore we have moved now to electric cars produced with renewable energy. But also here it depends on how this electricity is produced. You know, if it's produced with low carbon, then it is worth to change your car. And also only if you drive a certain amount, because the production of the batteries and so on needs more efforts, generates more environmental impact. So only roughly about from 80,000 kilometers per car, it starts to become interesting to run electric on a low carbon grid. So the other focused life cycle is the food one. And it's evident that moving to a vegetarian diet will reduce the environmental impacts, not only on the carbon, but also on biodiversity loss, moving away from less intensive agriculture. So it's mainly for dairy and meat products that the agriculture plays a key role. But if you want to eat vegetables in winter and you import them from the southern hemisphere, then of course also the impact is very high due to the transport. So it's not only the agriculture to be blamed in this value chain neither. And you had heard that the European Commission has taken action to address this whole value chain from food as another main challenge ahead to green it. So overall, we see then that from a life cycle perspective, the impacts are not as traditionally when I did my studies was all the chemical plant is the problem. We need to regulate the chemical plant. Nowadays, that's quite regulated. The emissions have gone down. Also, accidents can still happen. But the pesticides produced in these chemical plants are used in open pits, in the vineyards around Bordeaux, or you have the mines needed for that are done for these new materials used for the low carbon solutions, because you have seen that the consumption is the problem in the case of the cars, for example, and overall we have an issue of end of life, of getting materials back and recycled to make a circular economy happen. So now I'm I will just check how much time I've left. I have 3 minutes to talk with you a bit about what we've done here at the region of Nouvelle-Aquitaine, where we as an expert group came up around 3 thematic axes how to help the region to implement a circular economy, ran down the topics of waste, recycling, industrial ecology, territorial ecology, and eco-design and functional economy. The latter part I was responsible for. So the waste is a typical agenda to increase the recycling rate. The industrial ecology and territorial ecology is to have eco parks, or to have also in the agriculture to the waste of one actor being the resources for the next one. And eco-design is, to develop new products that have lower environmental impact. And the functional economy is what I will explain you in a moment. So what we came up with some action is the circular economy platform that is now live. You have here Recita and tools for business run by the Chamber of Commerce. We have had some support for education in different parts of the region, and also some support for organizing the Life Cycle Management Conference in 2015, for example. So now my last aspect here around the functional economy. Functional economy is moving, from being the owner of a product to just using the performance, the function of a product. You have here examples like the car sharing or bike sharing, and also instead of buying tires, you are buying kilometers of a tire used. And we were actually invited by the president of the region to a roundtable dinner on the topic of functional economy. And his main interest was actually to talk about how to do this in agriculture, because I told you, Bordeaux, as you might know, is known for wines, and there is a lot of pressure from using pesticides and fertilizers on these fields. So one solution is to move to precisioning agriculture using, not more amounts of chemicals, but using now precisioning, IT and geomapping and multiple sensors in order to get as less as volume of chemicals to the fields with this, maintaining the same productivity. So, and finally, from our research, what we are doing very quickly, we are actually focusing on the topic of dissipation and in how to include this in the assessment tool, life cycle assessment, that is used for reducing the environmental impacts in eco-design. So we are looking at how to anticipate the losses around the value chain, and what is just the opposite of a circular economy. And we also have had a case study on seeing how environmental impacts relate to circularity indicators and how this goes hand in hand. You see, for example, if you increase the utility, that means the lifetime and the intensity of use, you get at the same time environmental impacts improvements, and you increase what is considered here circularity by the MCI indicator of Alan MacArthur. With this, I thank you for your attention already, and I leave you here with the conclusions that circular economy is a change from a linear to a circular model, provides create positive value. It's about life cycle thinking, and not only the European Union, but also regions and cities have a key role to play. And one way forward is to think about how to implement a functional economy. And as said, research and knowledge have a key role to play. And I encourage people to think about how to understand dissipation as the root cause of why we don't have a circular economy. With this, I will thank you for your attention again, and I'm available later for answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guido. That's a very interesting talk, a very, very important topic, the circular economy, and trying to reduce the resource consumption in there. So I'm going to hand over next now to Professor Estibaliz Saez de Cámara, who's an associate professor in the area of environmental technology and a scientist at the Atmospheric Research Group in the University of the Basque Country. She holds a PhD in environmental engineering, focus on atmospheric pollution and climate change. Since 2017, she's the head of sustainability, and she's a member of the Council of Cooperation in the Basque government and vice president of the Spanish Network for Sustainable Development. Last summer, she participated as an expert of the work stream Protecting the Planet and Building Resilience of the 2020 High-Level Political Forum of the United Nations. She's also involved in researching and publishing on transformative learning and science for sustainability. So before I hand you over, just to remind people that in the chat function on Zoom, if you have any questions for the panel, then please put them in there, and we'll should have about 10 minutes at the end, hopefully, to ask any questions. So over to you, Tess, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see the screen? It's okay?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just arriving.
Now, yes, it's okay. Good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for connecting to this Flagship lecture session. In the following 20 minutes, I plan to say a few words about climatic feedbacks. What are these feedbacks and how do they work? And I will answer to this question. Is there any connection between tourism-led land use changes in the Mediterranean and extreme rainfall events in Central Europe? What do you think? Yes or no? Being the title of this talk, I'm sure that your answer is yes, there must be a connection. That's why let me propose you a more difficult one. Is there any connection between the emission of air pollutants in Europe and the extra fertilization of Amazonian rainforest? Without any doubt, our planet is sick and it's experiencing unprecedented changes. But what about you? How are you? How do you feel? Are you tired after walking all morning? Do you feel stressed and powerless after 1 year fighting the pandemic? Let's relax a little bit and let's think about our plans for next summer to stay positive. Let's do it together. Now, for a couple of minutes, I would like you to relax, to take a deep breath and place your feet flat on the floor. Now, place your hands on your stomach and take 2, 3 deep breaths, noticing your stomach rising and falling. And when you feel comfortable, please close your eyes. Now, please visualize these summer's holidays in a Mediterranean resort. Imagine waking up with the beautiful Mediterranean light, a morning walk taking fresh and clean air, a breakfast with the Mediterranean products, a walk on the beach, reading a book at noon with the relief of the sea breeze, another late walk in the afternoon with the fragrance left by a summer storm. Great. I would like you now slowly bring your attention back to the room, noticing the sounds around you and begin to open your eyes. So how are you feeling? Relaxed? Okay, so now we can start. Now that you are relaxed, I'm going to give you some bad news. The first one, forget about the morning walk, taking fresh and clean air, because the concentration of air pollutants in Southern Europe is over the limit values nearly every day during the warm season. And the second bad news, forget about the walk in the afternoon with the fragrance left by a summer storm, because we have modified the precipitation patterns and of this basin, and the summer storms are less and less frequent in the Mediterranean. But what's happening in the Mediterranean? Why is it one of the planet's most sensitive regions to climate change? What are the effects of these changes at the continental, European and global scales? Around the Mediterranean Sea, deserts and desert-like conditions can be found in close proximity to a very warm sea, the coasts of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Almeria in southeastern Spain. These regions were covered with vegetation in historical times, for example, during the Roman Empire, and in the case of Almeria, just 2 centuries ago. Forest removal caused them to run a feedback cycle towards desertification. Now, my question is it going to run the urbanization of coastal zones similar processes in Spain, in France, in Italy, in Greece, and in some other southern countries? Unfortunately, the results from several research projects suggest that this could be the case. The hydrological system in this region is very sensitive to land use changes, and more recently to air pollution effects as well. The Western Mediterranean system consists of a deep and warm sea covered by an air mass with a high moisture content and totally surrounded by high mountains. Here, anticyclonic conditions, that is nice weather, prevail for approximately 7 months. In this context, sea breezes develop. As you probably know, sea breezes are caused by the differential heating rates of land and sea. During the day, the land heats up more rapidly than the sea because land has a lower specific heat than water. Warm air over land rises, creating a lower pressure at the surface, and cool air from over the sea tends to move from the sea to the land. Fantastic, isn't it? It's the most environmentally friendly and efficient air conditioning system. But we have another system in the Mediterranean. As Western Mediterranean is surrounded by high mountains, during the day we have also upslope winds or valley breezes. They occur when solar radiation hits air at lower elevations, causing it to flow upslope. At night we have the opposite processes. Wind blows from the land to the sea and upwards, and downslope, mountain breeze. Okay, focusing on daytime conditions. The sea breezes grow as they travel inland. In this figure, you can see, or in this figure, it's represented the vertical velocity from the sea to the land. And here you can appreciate what does it happen normally during the warm season in the Mediterranean. As the sea breezes travel inland, they grow by successively incorporating these upslope wind cells. And the result is a product that is stronger than the sum of its components. We have a combined breeze. This combined breeze increases, and finally what we have are some convective chimneys, orographic chimneys that inject the air more than 4 or 6 kilometers. Here you can see that the altitude of these chimneys increases as the breeze enters inland. They can reach inland more than 100 kilometers, and as mentioned, the modeling results show that the chimneys can reach up from 4 to 6 kilometers by late afternoon. To maintain this flow continuity at night, what we have are winds in the opposite direction. We have land breezes in the opposite direction, and the compensatory subsidence over the sea compensatory subsidence is generated, and it's general all over the basin. These mechanisms generate vertical recirculations upwards during the daytime and from the sea to the land, and in the opposite direction, downwards and from the land to the sea at night. This does not happen every day, just sometimes. We always have sea breezes, but we do not always have the winds in the opposite direction, bringing the pollutants from the sea inland and from inland to the sea again. Okay, here's the key. In the past, before the urbanization of the Mediterranean coast, the Mediterranean coastlands were covered by ponds, by salt marshes, and by natural habitats. Thus, when the marine air mass moved inland, its water vapor content increased because of the evaporation from the surface of these natural environments. The marine air mass accumulated enough moisture to reach its condensation level, and storms developed, especially in these orographic chimneys. Therefore, a large fraction of the water vapor precipitated, bringing back the water to these natural environments, to the rivers, to ponds and natural habitats, resulting in the mixing of the sea breeze components, including the non-precipitated water vapor. In other words, in the past, the coastal circulations were open. Nowadays, or better, from the 60s, 70s on, when tourists forced land use and landscape changes in coastal Mediterranean areas, and when natural habitats were converted to tourism-based establishments, such as hotels, service buildings, and settlements, the combined breeze has not been able to, the combined breeze is not able to accumulate enough moisture to compensate the heating along its path from the Mediterranean inland. And in addition, buildings and highways, in contrast to forests and to these natural ponds, do not accumulate water and do not provide water to these combined sea breezes. Thus, the cloud condensation level of the air mass rises above the mountain peaks, and summer storms do not develop. The sea breezes component do not mix, and they return back to the sea with the land breeze, where they accumulate. What does it happen the next day? The accumulated pollutants and the water vapor re-enters. They re-enter again, and with the sea breezes, and they go back again to the sea during the next night. This process, inland and again to the sea, can be repeated for more than 3-4 days. And as a result, what we have is a loss of the summer storms and an accumulation of air pollutants over the sea at night, especially. We can have an accumulation of the pollutants from the surface of the Mediterranean till 5 kilometers. And as you can see, currently what we have are these kind of circulations, this kind of closed circulations. Now I will explain you the consequences, And these conditions or this situation occurs in Northern Africa, it occurs in the Iberian Peninsula, in France, and in Italy as well. At this stage, land use change appears to be the main driving factor, determining whether the local atmospheric circulations become open or whether they remain closed, with no precipitation and with vertical recirculations. In turn, the loss of summer storms inland results in drier soil inland, increased surface heating, higher condensation levels, and thus the reinforcement of the first feedback loop towards desertification. At this stage, the second feedback loop arises from the greenhouse effect of all the pollutants accumulated over the sea, which would tend to increase the cumulative heating of the sea during summer. In the upper figure, you can see the sea surface temperatures in the Mediterranean in 203. Very probably you remember this year because during this summer a heat wave affected Europe, and the sea surface temperature in the Mediterranean was over 30 degrees, even higher in some areas. And in the lower figure, you can see the water vapor accumulation. It's expressed in centimeters, and these data have been extracted from satellites. As it can be seen under these conditions, I mean with closed circulations and with air pollution, in the Western Mediterranean, we have a bag of water vapor and a bag of air pollutants. These higher sea surface temperatures increase torrential precipitation over the coastal areas, especially in autumn and in winter, and the Mediterranean cyclogenesis. And because warm water pools move within the basin, they can feed torrential rains and floods randomly anywhere in the basin. Thus, this second feedback loop also tends to propagate the effects of land use perturbations to other parts of the basin and in erratic fashion. The third feedback loop originates through the loss of non-precipitated moisture accumulated over the sea when it becomes uplifted out of the basin, out of the Mediterranean basin. The vented air mass can then follow two different paths. The European route, as happened in 202, resulting in historical floods in Central Europe, or the African one. Let me show you what happened in 202 with this bag of pollutants and water vapor and the consequences in Central Europe. Here you can see the sequence of the water vapor that was accumulated over the Mediterranean, and there you can see the target area in which extreme rainfall events were registered this year. The loss of moisture alters the balance between evaporation and self-precipitation in the West Mediterranean basin, and this tends to increase the saline content of the deep water flowing from Gibraltar to the Atlantic. How this saltier outflow could affect processes at the North Atlantic level and at what time it operates and what critical thresholds, if any, could be accepted are additional questions. Here you have the typing points of our climatic system. When the accumulated air mass is transported to Africa and vented along the Southern Atlas corridor, it can provide moisture and pollutants. This can modify the characteristics of Saharan dust transported across the Central Atlantic towards the Caribbean or the Mediterranean continent. And this dust, small particles, can affect visibility in the eastern coast of the United States, or they can act as vectors of European and African microorganisms, as well as add anthropogenic fertilizers to the Amazonian forests. So the answers to question 1 and 2 are yes and yes, there are connections between them. And let me finish with the fourth feedback. How the modified particles affect weather processes over the Caribbean and the United States, and how they link to the North Atlantic oscillation to the conditions over Europe are questions related with the fourth feedback loop. However, if combined effects of the two components in the Atlantic global loop influence the North Atlantic oscillation positively, we could expect an increase in the precipitations in Northern Europe and a decrease of precipitations in the Mediterranean area and in Southern Europe in general. Both the available data and the modeling results at the regional scale indicate that these processes are already operating, and they suggest that the fundamental changes and long-term perturbations to the water cycle are taking place right now, and that they will continue operating and modifying our system even more, and that the climate of Europe as well as the global climate are going to suffer even more feedbacks. But perhaps it's not too late to reverse this trend. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. That concludes my talk, and now I invite you to your comments and questions.
Thank you very much. Excellent talk, very elegant. I love the start where you got us to relax. I'm standing up here. I nearly relaxed too much and wanted to lie down beside me here, but very good talk. So I invite the panel members to, if you wouldn't mind turning on your videos there. I've got a number of questions here that I'm going to pose in there. We've got about 10 minutes left. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so Veronica, I'll start with you if that's okay. So excellent talk, bringing us through the Green Deal, the policies, the direction that Europe are going, and very exciting. I think Europe is a very exciting place to be living, to be working at the moment. And good that these deals have been backed up by financial packages. So the EU budget that's complemented by the recovery package, so we can have a more resilient, greener economy. 1.85 trillion euro is a lot of money that can help to boost and sustain the efforts to build back greener, digital and fair. We obviously need to facilitate that just transition to a low carbon future, to the provision of the underlying research and innovation. I suppose that's the world that we come from, the other three panelists here, research innovation, but also training highly skilled leaders of tomorrow, so through our universities, but not just that, our primary schools, our high schools, our secondary schools, third level, and further education and so on. So what do you think are the key skills and attributes that, say, graduates from our university might need?
Thank you for the question, Jamie. Well, more than purely academic or educational background skills, I see psychological skills, which are going to play a really important role. And I think in skills in terms of visionary capacity, because we need to envision in so many sectors a world that indeed doesn't yet exist. We are really heading towards the creation of different types of jobs compared to those that we have been used to witness over the last, say, 50 years or so. We need team working capacities, so people that are really good at bringing colleagues together, being open-minded, inclusive, interdisciplinary. Yes, really this ability to connect the dots, risk-friendly. It's also, typically I think Europe has always scored as being a rather risk-adverse continent if you compare it notably to the United States. I think we will have to become safely more risk-friendly, because when you try to innovate naturally, there is an element of, uncertainty. I know it may sound slightly, how can I say, emotional, but I'm Italian by background. And I always say, imagine if Leonardo da Vinci sitting in front of the wall in Milano, where today we see the wonderful Last Supper, would have said, it's a wall, it has some cracks, not sure I like it. He envisioned something. There was nothing there. And centuries afterwards, we're still admiring the beauty of what has come out of that. This is the type of skills that I'm looking for in the next generation. Thanks.
Very good. I like the reference to Leonardo da Vinci. I suppose being an engineer, I'd claim him as an engineer, but also the artists would claim him in that side. He's an inventor, an engineer, artist. So he is, I suppose, the embodiment of transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary work. And without that, he wouldn't be so famous today if he was, a traditional engineer and so on. So those are the unique people. Those are the people that possibly transform and change our world in it. That come with different thinking, learn, listen to people from different backgrounds, different disciplines in there. Very good. Okay, so just I was conscious of time, so I'll try and get one question at least to each panel member, and we'll see how we get on after that. So Guido, I have a question here from my colleague Sinead Mitchell. So she's asking, how ready are the French business for the circular economy generally? And then, so that's on the business side. Then you have government side. So have the development of regional industrial symbiotic systems been supported by government or through national or local legislation in there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the companies is, as said by Veronica, a lot of its psychology plays a role. So some companies have taken a leadership role and are pioneers in addressing circular economy challenges, and others are just continuing doing business as usual. So that's very difficult, to not without being very specific. So on the second point, the efforts I talk about are really supported by the regional government that has in France a clear role to be the one supporting companies, particularly, small and medium-sized companies, for the questions of innovation and economic well-being. And they see that there is a need to change. And also, I think there was also motivation with regard to circular economy around this question of positive value. It's access to resources locally that are there because the consumers generate these wastes, and in order to get this being used. So there were real efforts done by the government to ensure that also from a public procurement side, certain of these regional recycled products get a priority in the procurement and so on. So I think government support at the regional level is clearly there. At the national level, also the circular economy part is, there are laws also on this part, and it's also linked to the overall law on energy transition.
Very good, yeah. Yes, was like yourself, Estibaliz and myself, we're all actually trained engineers, I think, looking at everyone's profile. So I believe that, while engineers have contributed significantly to the climate crisis, we as engineers can now lead a path to sustainability. But I also strongly believe that behavior change across our societies, businesses and communities are essential to addressing the global challenges of that just transition in relation to climate change, resource use, biodiversity loss and pollution. So, again, going back to this transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary thing. From the Bordeaux example of academic engaging with businesses, what learnings could be taken from that say other universities that are members of the Enlight network could take from it to support the delivery of the circular economy?
Yeah, I think that there is this topic of industrial symbiosis or territorial ecology, where it depends always on how you have relationships and how you put companies together. So I think that there is the opportunity, if there are this very network that has so many, is anchored in so many different countries and regions, to exchange on these experience with very different settings, but at the end a similar challenge. And I remember there was in the green call, there was a deal call. There were questions of promoting a circular economy, and perhaps such a network could jointly respond by sharing these experiences and sort of learning through case studies and sharing, coming to best practice. I could imagine something like this moving ahead.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So I suppose building on that, it's the, we have shared learnings in different parts of the globe that can be shared, and we can learn a lot from each other. And we know that climate change, resource use, biodiversity loss, and pollution are these huge global challenges. But we also know that the solution lies locally as well. We can solve this locally, and if we all solve it locally, then it will be solved globally. I think your keynote so elegantly presented the connection between land use change in one part of our planet and extreme events like rainfall in another part of our planet. So, local decisions that are made locally are having a big global impact. What would be the most effective way that the in-light partner universities could share best practice with each other to enhance capacity of industry, to inform policy, maybe to empower our societies in the regions that say we live? For example, myself in the west of Ireland here, where I live and work, so that we can build back our economies for greener, digital and fairer, as per set out by the European Commission.
From my talk, perhaps, or after my talk, it was one of the main objectives. Global warming and climate change is not just because of the emission of greenhouse gases. And I think that most industries and the society in general, it's not, it just considers these greenhouse emissions and not some other kind of pollutant changes, habits. So one of the main challenges is just to study the climate change from a global point of view. And this requires the collaboration from people from different disciplines. This is one of the key aspects. And the other one is, as I mentioned, we have to start with local solutions. And we can start, or we should start with the collaboration of very, very different agents. Start changing our habits, start changing the ways to produce and to consume different items. But we have to do it being conscious that if we want to create, or if we want to provoke a big change, a change that can stop this trend, we have to do it all together and from very, very different approximations. In order to change it globally, we have to start acting. If we want to change our planet, we have to start it from our own home, from our own university, or from our own enterprise. So transdisciplinary collaboration and collaboration between different agents, stakeholders.
Very good. No, I think that's actually a very good way to close it, in terms of, we all have to take personal responsibility. We all have to change. We all have to take action now. We can't just rely on others to take action to challenges. So we all have our part to play, and we have our part to play individually through the institutions that we are affiliated with, through our local communities, and so on. So with that, I would like to thank so much our panel members. Three very excellent talks, three different perspectives on things, but I think all coming together to give us a very clear picture of what needs to happen. So thank you very much, and with that I close the session.